Hello folks, this is Tom from Guiding Arrow Astrology. This video is going to be about lunar eclipses and solar eclipses and what causes them. As any novice astrologer will know, the lunar eclipses and the solar eclipses are caused by the lunar nodes, which go by various names in various traditions. You might have heard them called dragon's head and dragon's tail, caput draconis in Latin, or if you're familiar with the Indian Vedic tradition, you might know them as Rahu and Ketu. Now, I've been studying this phenomenon for a while. I've been studying these points because in every single astrological tradition, the north and south nodes are mired in mystery. Every astrologer treats them with the kind of seriousness, and they don't usually know what to say besides these are destiny points. They're strong points. They are mystical points. So in this video, I hope to elucidate some of that, bring you guys up to date with some of the research I've been doing and some of the articles I found and some of the visual and cultural information I've found that can deepen our understanding of these nodes, not just as something to fear, but something to truly understand. So I'll start by talking about this article which I came across. It was published in 1938 in a journal called Ars Islamica, which just means Islamic art, and it's by an author by the name of Willie Hartner. The article is called The Pseudo-Planetary Nodes of the Moon's Orbit in Hindu and Islamic Iconographies. Now, as an art history buff, I really appreciate this article because Willie Hartner's argument is completely built around the imagery he actually finds, and it serves as really strong evidence of his point, which let me try to sum up a little bit. So Hartner's main focus in this article is on a bridge called, this bridge was situated across the Tigris in, I believe, modern Iraq, and the bridge is called the Bridge of Jazirat ibn Umar. And on this bridge, archaeologists discovered the classical depictions of the planets in their signs of exaltations. And you all will know, of course, if you have any knowledge of basic astrology, that the domicile rulerships, the Sun ruling Leo, the Moon Cancer, Mercury Virgo, Mercury Gemini, Venus Libra, Taurus, Saturn Aquarius, Capricorn, and so on, you will know that the exaltations of each planet will be the signs in which they hold the most glory. But that's besides the point. On this bridge were visible the carvings of the planets, depictions of the planets, along with the sign of their exaltation. So on the bridge you can see the moon along with a depiction of the sign Taurus. You'll see Venus along with a depiction of the sign Pisces, Saturn in Libra, Mercury in Virgo. One strange fact about this bridge is that instead of depicting the sun in its traditional sign of exaltation, which is Aries, on this bridge you'll see a depiction of the solar disk on the back of the lion, which is, the sun traditionally rules Leo, but on this bridge it's treated as the sign of exaltation as well. But the truly main focus of this article that was so groundbreaking for me is the 8th planet, quote unquote, depicted on this bridge, which was very puzzling at first to figure out because, of course, we know Sun, Moon, Mercury, Jupiter, Saturn, Venus, and Mars are the traditional 7 planets, but there's an 8th carving which shows a strange creature. Now this creature bore an inscription which read, it is a Persian word which read something like Jawzar. Now Willie Hartner actually looks into the etymology and the origins of this word itself, and he shows how this word is actually what they called the lunar north and south node. So I'll kind of skip over the part where he's talking about the actual exaltations, because this creature, which is a knotted serpent, a dragon-like sort of creature, is pictured along with the archer of Sagittarius, which would propose that the lunar node monster, as depicted, would be exalted in the sign of Sagittarius. So what does this all mean, and why does it matter when we consider the eclipses? Well, first of all, as I mentioned, the eclipse points, I mean, the bodies causing the eclipses, Rahu, Ketu, the north and south node, are mired in mystery in modern astrology. But this article does a lot to elucidate what they actually mean, and we can peek behind the veil to see some of the mystery behind these pseudo-planets. So one key to this mystery, the key to open the door to this mystery, is actually the word Djauxar in itself. Willie goes on to describe different perspectives, ancient and medieval, as to what the word, the Persian word Djauxar, meant and where it came from. So he finds that it's mentioned in certain dictionaries, in Latin and Arabic dictionaries, where it is translated both as a comet or as the lunar and south node. Now, these dictionaries also give an etymology along with this explanation of the meaning of the term, and the dictionaries propose that this term Djauxar comes from another Persian term that was sort of changed when it was transliterated into Arabic, and the original term would be Gao Chitra. So pardon my pronunciation if that's not correct, but it's Gao Chitra, and this word is a compound word. The prior part of it, Gao, is related to our English word cow. So that's the first part of the word. And then Chitra. Chitra is, if you're familiar with Vedic astrology, will be very familiar to you. It's the name of one of the constellations on Spica, the star Spica in the sky, in the Virgin. But this word Chitra is translated in various ways. It can be translated to mean comet itself, to mean shining, or as Willie proposes, and going off of the Arabic example, it can be translated as the seed or a type of nut. And so what I have difficulty actually expressing right now is how sexual the meaning of this word is. And that is kind of a key to understanding the meaning of the eclipses in themselves, in a nutshell, so to speak. So what is the bull, and what was it to ancient cultures, and why does it relate to the lunar nodes? Now that question is very broad, and it's quite difficult to answer. But in exploring the theme of the bull in ancient culture, I hope to elucidate a little bit, give clues, and you can sort of come to your own conclusions about what it means. So first off, I'll start off by mentioning that the bull was quite an important symbol of male fertility as well as female fertility in the ancient Middle East, in ancient Egypt, as well as ancient Greece. Now, I will simply stick to ancient Greek examples because they are quite effective in showing you just how strong this bull imagery was for these people. One of the key myths I want you to take note of is the myth of the rape of Europa. Zeus came down and took this mortal woman, and he came down in the shape of the bull. And from that union, the entire culture of Crete was born. Zeus's rape of Europa was essentially the springboard for the growth, the flowering of Minoan culture. And you can refer to various ancient genealogies to see that idea corroborated. And if you know anything about art, especially Greek pottery, you'll see that there are various river gods depicted on vases and cups and everything you can think of. And these river gods are always depicted as having bull horns. Now, in addition to having bull horns, these river gods are depicted as having long snake-like tails. And this relates to this idea of the lunar nodes if we go back to the Latin name for them, which is Caput Draconis, which means the dragon's head. Excuse me, I don't know the Latin term right now for the dragon's tail, but the eclipsed dragon has always been a potent symbol for these lunar nodes. And that dragon is alike to the snake. They have the same type of body, and even in Chinese culture, dragons are considered extremely powerful divine beings with their own rules and with a kind of a mystical association, just total divine power, the incarnation of divinity. So when we consider all these myths surrounding these bull gods and these snake form gods, the funny thing is that they're always, and pardon my French, they're very horny. These these bull gods, they're always running after maidens, pursuing maidens. They always want to mate. And that in itself is one of the key linking connections between our understanding of the lunar nodes and our understanding of the bull symbology. This word Gau Chitra, the sperm of the bull, the seed of the bull, is at once associated with the moon, because the moon was known to send out bulls, and in symbolic language it's depicted as a bull. And the bull in Vedic mythology, you have the story of Soma, the god of the moon, who was in love with Rohini, which was one of the asterisms in the sky in the constellation of Taurus. So the moon and the bull are linked together in various cultures. But in addition to that, the Greek context, as well as the Egyptian context, where you have the Apis bull, who represents the pharaoh, who represents the divinity. In all these contexts, you see that the fertility and the preeminence of power and is always associated with the bull. And of course, you have a huge tradition of the sacrifice of the bull. If you know anything about the myth of the Minotaur on Crete, the bull-headed man. He was the bull-headed man, and his father was cursed by Poseidon because Poseidon sent his father a beautiful bull. But instead of sacrificing that bull as the god would have wanted, King Minos kept the bull, and he sacrificed another instead. So that led to a curse. And this curse exercised itself upon his wife Pasiphae, Queen Pasiphae, who, if you really do some research, you'll see it's kind of a perverted story with a lot of sexual undertones and perversion about it. She asked the master craftsman Daedalus to build a fake bull, in so many words, in order to be able to have sex with this divine bull sent from Poseidon. And that is the story of the genesis of the horrible monster trapped in the labyrinth, which was called the Minotaur. So my hope is that you'll see from these various examples just how strongly the imagery of the bull was associated with the notion of divine kingship. Now, let's go back to the word horn, the word horny. If you're familiar at all with biblical history, you'll know the figure of Moses. And from ancient times up to medieval times, Moses was depicted with bull's horns. And wearing the bull's horns and emulating the bull was a widespread cultural tradition in the ancient world that was meant to convey a preeminent status in society and was meant to convey power and fertility and masculinity. Especially with the cult of Dionysus. The cult of Dionysus shows a strong association with the bull, worship of the bull. Dionysus was said to have come down as a bull. But I digress. The word horny in itself, though it's somewhat of a curse word or a taboo in our modern culture, actually goes back to the fertility associated with the horned animals in the first place. And this goes back, of course, to the term Gauchitra, which became the term Jauzar, which was written underneath the depiction of the eclipse dragon. So when we contemplate this effect on our own personal lives, we think about the role of sexuality, the role of fertility, and the power that the stars have to come down and shower us with wealth and with divine knowledge, which is in itself a process of penetration and a sexual awakening in a way, like to a tantric ritual. So to put this all in perspective, the moment of the eclipse, and for all of you wondering how to sort of apply this knowledge to your own birth chart, how to make this knowledge come alive for you in your own life, I would advise you to stop thinking of these eclipses as scary moments of perdition or, a showdown. It's instead a moment of divine providence that you can take advantage of by becoming receptive. And of course, the moon being the most receptive feminine planet, it's the one shining the sun's light. The moon in itself represents the mind and the bull. And coming together with all the symbology, it's a moment where things go awry based on the divine plan. But let me stop talking about nonsense. One great example that I'd like to mention that gives life to all of my points that I've been trying to make is contained within a text called the Dionysica by Nonnus. It's an ancient text describing every god, describing the origins of Dionysus, the origins of Zeus, and the chapter I would like to highlight is the one on the rape of Persephone. Because during this chapter we have an amazing passage in which the god of astrology, whose name was Astraeus, he gave a reading to Demeter, who was absolutely torn up from the loss of her daughter, and she came to Astraeus to ask him what was going wrong and how she could find her daughter, because she was tearing her hair out looking for her. So I'll read right now from the Dionysica, and this is when the god Astraeus is giving a reading to Demeter, the goddess, about her daughter Persephone. Okay, he, Astraeus, learnt the details of the day when her only child, Persephone, was newborn, and the exact time and veritable course of the season which gave her birth. Then he bent the turning fingers of his hands and measured the moving circle of the ever-recurring number, counting from hand to hand in double exchange, reckoning the number of days and the years of her life on his fingers. He called to a servant, and Asterion lifted a round revolving sphere, the shape of the sky, the image of the universe, and laid it upon the lid of a chest. Here the ancient got to work. He turned it upon its pivot, and directed this gaze around the circle of the zodiac, scanning in this place and that the planets and the fixed stars. He rolled the pole about with a push, and the counterfeit sky went rapidly round and round in mobile course with a perpetual movement, carrying the artificial stars about the axle set through the middle. Observing the sphere with a glance all around, the deity found that Selene, the moon, at full, was crossing the curved line of her conjunction, and Phaeton, Helios, the sun, was half through his course opposite Mene, the moon moving at its central point under the earth. A pointed cone of darkness creeping from the earth into the air opposite to the sun hit the whole moon. Then, when he heard the rivals for wedded love, he looked especially for Ares, the planet Mars, and espied the wife-robber over the sunset house along with the evening star, the planet Venus. He found the portion called the portion of the parents under Virgo's starry corn ear, and round the ear ran the light-bearing star Jupiter, father of rain. When he had noticed everything and reckoned the circuit of the stars, he put away the ever-revolving sphere in its roomy box, the sphere with its curious surface, and in answer to the goddess he mouthed out a triple oracle of prophetic sound. Fond mother Demeter, when the rays of the moon are stolen under a shady cone and her light is gone, guard against a robber bridegroom for Persephonia, a secret ravisher of your unsmirched girl, if the threads of the Moirae, the fates, can be persuaded. You will see before marriage a false and secret bedfellow come unforeseen, a half-monster cunning-minded, since I perceive the western point Ares, the wife-stealer, walking with the Paphian, the planet Venus, and I notice the dragon is rising beside them both. But I proclaim you most happy, for you will be known for glorious fruits in the four quarters of the universe, because you shall bestow fruit on the barren soil, since the virgin Astraea, the constellation Virgo, holds out her hands full of corn for the destined lot of your girl's parents. This, he said, he let the oracular voice sleep in his mouth. So this passage is presaging the seduction and abduction of Persephone by Zeus in the guise of a serpent, and the birth of their son Zagreus, who would later be murdered by the Titans. So this is obviously different from the traditional depiction of the rape of Persephone, but you have to understand that Orpheism is where this came from. But besides all that, the passage in itself is amazing, and it is so priceless because it shows us how the ancient astrologer would have worked, and how he had some sort of magic sphere that he could spin around and look at all the stars and do horoscopes and predictions. And in this passage, it seems he's doing something like a progressed chart. But besides all that, if you paid attention, you will have noticed that in Persephone's progressed chart, there was a lunar eclipse, meaning that the moon was being obscured, and that this is the clue that gave him the knowledge, in addition to the positions of Venus and Mars and Jupiter. This was what gave Asterion, or Astraeus, the god of astrology, this is what gave him the knowledge of what was to come to be. Now also, if you are a little bit perceptive, you might have also noticed that the starry corn ear of the Virgin was mentioned. So the starry corn ear of the Virgin is the chaff of wheat that Virgo holds, and that chaff of wheat is a star in itself called Spica, also known as Chitra. Isn't that lovely how that all works out? So let's go back to the term Gau Chitra. the seed of the bull. In this instance of a divine marriage of sorts, having Zeus, the biggest god, come down and take your daughter, it's like, oh, that's an honor. It's not really a pain. I mean, Demeter was of course worried, but when she found out that it was Zeus and a fine god behind all this treachery, she was able to calm, and she was able to see, okay, wow, this is actually a blessing in disguise, and such is the nature of the eclipse. But to go back to the term Gauchitra, the seed of the bull, you have here an interesting dichotomy here between the bull and the snake. Now, elsewhere, I mentioned before how Zeus came down as the bull in the story of the rape of Europa, but in the story of the rape of Persephone, the monster that raped Persephone was in the form of the dragon, and this, was the transmuted form of Zeus. And that dragon, of course, relates to the snake, and dragon, as I mentioned before, is how we imagine the lunar nodes. So, this information, it provides us a wealth of ideas and concepts that we can play with in order to understand truly the implications of the nodes and what they could practically mean. But bringing this aspect of astrology into practical knowledge is, of course, very difficult because the themes it implicates are divine, mystical, and truly awesome. And Willie Hartner, of course, mentions in his article that the knowledge of the nodes in astrological communities and in astrological traditions and schools was kind of a hush-hush. It was kind of a secret knowledge because these are invisible planets, grahas, they call it in the Vedic tradition. These planets that have such a strong effect on the sun and moon and cause the eclipses are actually invisible. So talking about them, describing their effect and how they work was reserved. This knowledge was reserved for people who were initiated, for people who were very knowledgeable already, and you had to know the basics of astrology in order to get to these higher points. Now let me go back to the word chitra. Here, chitra, Willie Hartner mentions, is related to the word for light, for clarity, and this Persian word, gau chitra, can be translated as the seed of the bull, and there are words that are similar, such as gau chir, which would be translated as bull-shaped or bull-faced. And these all contribute to the etymology of Jawzar, which was what these Persian astrologers and Arabic astrologers called the lunar nodes. And even in Avestan, Chitra means semen. So, if you take a real analytical look at all the information I've given you, you'll see that this notion of sex, the notion of reproduction, the notion of rape, the notion of rapture, they're all tied up in these themes, and it's very touchy because it is quite a metaphysical conception. But what I want to essentially contribute to the modern knowledge of the lunar nodes is that in an etymological sense, in a mythological sense, and as attested throughout history, they relate to sexuality. They relate to sexuality of the divine, sexuality of the gods themselves. Zeus coming down and finding the most beautiful specimen on this earth in order to procreate with her. So I think honestly that's really all I can muster out this evening to share with you guys. I thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope maybe you can revisit this information. I know it probably didn't come out in the best, most structurally formulated way, but there's so much here to consider, so much light to be shed on these lunar nodes, and it truly does relate to some of the more mystical aspects of religion, ancient religion, astrology, esoteric knowledge. And if you're truly ready to receive that, then that is beautiful, and I hope you continue to tune into my channel. So thanks, guys.